All right, so hello everyone. My name's Liz. I'm the program manager at Carolina Navigators at UNC Chapel Hill. And I'm here today with three of my students, Grace, Hia, and Emma. And they're going to teach you a little bit about some of the countries that they've studied abroad in or worked abroad in Ecuador, Bangladesh, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so they're going to give you some background information on those countries, and they're also going to talk about some social movements that have taken place in those countries, which might connect some with what you're studying in civics and economics. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my students.
Hi, everybody. I'm Grace. I'm a junior at Carolina. I'm from New Orleans, and last semester I spent a few months in Ecuador studying abroad and doing a little research. Um, and so that's where I'll be presenting on today.
So we wanted to kind of start off the activity by asking you all, what's a social movement? So what comes to mind when you think of that? And you can use the chat or you can unmute yourselves or however you want to answer. So yeah, you all had kind of the right idea. A group of diffusely organized people or organizations striving towards a common goal relating to human society or social change. So both the struggle for trans rights and Black Lives Matter are both good examples of social movements.
Hi, everybody. So this is just a little background about Ecuador. So Ecuador is in Latin America, specifically South America. So it borders Peru and Colombia. Um, And some of the main languages spoken in Ecuador are Spanish, but also Quechua, Guarani, as well as Ecuadorian Sign Language. And Quechua and Guarani are indigenous languages. There are many indigenous languages in Ecuador, as well as a large population of Afro-Indigenous and Indigenous people. Ecuador is a smaller country, so it's about 17 million people. However, like ecologically, it is very diverse. And so, kind of like North Carolina, there's like city, there are more rural parts, also known as pueblos, um, as well as there are mountains, as well as like beaches. So it is smaller, but it is still very diverse in a lot of ways. So here is the Ecuadorian flag, and this is one of the downtown areas of Quito, which is one of their largest cities, and this is actually where I studied abroad. So I'm very familiar with this street. Hi everyone. So I'll be talking a little bit about Ecuador and social movements related to civil rights as well as resource accessibility. And so like the sort of what or the crux of what we're talking about is basically 2 weeks of protests in Quito, Ecuador. And Quito is one of Ecuador's largest cities. So these protests got a lot of national and international attention, specifically in South America, but also in Europe, United States, Asia, really all over. And so, why were people protesting? So, the president of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno, um, had just accepted or notified the people that he was going to accept a decree that would eliminate gas subsidies. And so, the elimination of gas subsidies would have caused a really large increase in the price of transportation, food, as well as other natural resources, but particularly transportation and food were two of the main concerns of citizens, especially in Ecuador. Public transportation is a really big part of the community. I remember when I was there, typically a bus ride from my homestay family's house to my university was like a quarter, so it was 25 cents. And they also use the United States dollar in Ecuador as well. And so it was a drastic difference. So basically, for a dollar, you could get very, very far throughout the city, perhaps even go to another province. And so public transportation is really important, and of course as well as food prices. And so a lot of people would have been affected negatively by such a sharp increase without having had any community input. And he'd also recently accepted a loan from the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, which basically is sort of a multinational kind of organization that deals with money and finances in different countries around the world. And so there were some citizens who were really okay with him accepting a loan, but there were other people who worried about the implications and the consequences of accepting such a loan and how that would impact the community. So for 2 weeks, there were a lot of advocacy efforts, especially from Indigenous communities. There are several Indigenous organizations in Ecuador, as well as large populations of Indigenous people. However, historically, Black Ecuadorians and Indigenous Ecuadorians have received a lot of prejudice and discrimination in regards to laws, as well as disenfranchisement. And so there were people of all different communities protesting in Ecuador, but there was a lot of organization specifically within Indigenous communities, especially because the resources such as food and transportation are especially important to these communities because they've often been blocked from having the same access as people who are not Black or not Indigenous. So what happened afterwards? The city, for the most part, in terms of what other Ecuadorians would say, they said it shut down. The main goal of protesters was basically to kind of block the roads, which would also impact transportation, with the main goal being speaking with the president or making the government very, very aware of their feelings and their perspectives. And so on October 14th, President Moreno met with representatives from some of Ecuador's Indigenous organizations, and that was really critical because in the past that has not always happened. Sometimes it can be very difficult to reach the president, especially if you are from a disenfranchised community or a community whose voice is not fully represented in sort of government conversations. And so there was a large meeting on October 14th, and eventually President Moreno repealed the decree. And so the goals of those protesters were met, and it was considered successful from that perspective. And there are always like multiple perspectives and multiple opinions and thoughts about protests and why they're happening. But the initial goal was to get the decree repealed. And on October 14th, President Moreno repealed the decree, which again had mixed perspectives. But it was considered a really important moment in time and represents sort of a larger legacy of Indigenous activism, particularly in Ecuador.